Okay, let's unpack this. You know that feeling when a certain song or movie just instantly transports you back?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
For me, it's The Cardigans, my favorite game.
Ah,
I can practically feel the late afternoon sunlight, hear the slightly distorted guitar blasting from this huge old CD player my Gen X mom had,
right.
the kind with speakers that would actually hum if you put your hand on them.
Ah, yeah. I remember those.
She'd be there, probably in some faded band tee and well-worn jeans, completely lost in the music. Even though I was just a kid, a millennial kid, that whole vibe felt significant, like
Yeah.
a peek into a world slightly before my time.
Well, what's fascinating there is how those early exposures create this almost like nostalgic feeling for a culture that wasn't strictly ours, you know?
Exactly.
It sounds like even as a younger listener, you were kind of picking up on a distinct Gen X sensibility.
Absolutely. And that personal experience really, it resonates with the topic of our deep dive today. We've got a Vogue opinion piece here titled, Hear Me Out, What If Gen Xers Are Actually the Cool Ones?
Interesting title.
It's a fun take that kind of throws a curveball into all the usual talk about which generation has it right when
Hmm.
it comes to, being cool.
So we're not just doing a 90s nostalgia trip then.
Mhm.
We're really digging into the arguments about Gen X's actual cultural impact.
That's the plan.
The author is suggesting that maybe amidst all the millennial Gen Z stuff and the boomer debates,
Hmm.
the truly cool ones are the generation that kind of flies under the radar.
Exactly. The author, she identifies as a millennial, and she really paints this picture of being raised on Gen X culture.
Okay.
Her musical landscape, shaped by bands like Pixies, PJ Harvey, Placebo.
Right, some heavy hitters there.
Yeah. And the films she gravitated towards Girl Interrupted, The Look of Fallen Angels, the energy of Run Lola Run, even Hackers.
Wow, okay. Quite a list. They all have that certain late 20th century feel, don't they?
Totally. And then she mentions writers like Bret Easton Ellis, Elizabeth Wurtzel, Irvine Welsh, all embodying what she calls Gen X sensibilities.
That personal connection is really key to understanding her angle, isn't it?
I think so.
It highlights this feeling of maybe watching it happen rather than being in it real time.
Yeah.
You mentioned the music. What was it about those artists she felt was so Gen X?
Well, I think it was this mix of like cynicism, but also a kind of raw authenticity, a rejection of anything too polished, maybe.
Uh-huh. Anti-mainstream.
Yeah, she even mentions feeling born 15 years or so too late to really experience that mixtape making, fiercely anti-corporate 90s slacker thing.
Right.
Instead, she felt like she landed in a world geared towards, online consumerism from the get-go.
Which nicely sets the stage for the bigger picture, doesn't it? The generational landscape.
It does.
The article touches on this almost predictable cycle now. Gen Z teasing millennials, everyone talking about boomers.
It's constant, yeah, often online.
And it's within this landscape of all this generational chatter that Gen X, born roughly 65 to 80,
Mm-hmm.
seemingly gets, well, the article says, largely forgotten about.
Right, and she even has the self-aware bit, acknowledging that pointing out Gen X is forgotten has almost become its own cliche.
Huh. That's true, actually.
Is it?
It's an interesting point, though. In all the focus on the new guard and the old guard, this huge group seems less central somehow.
Which leads right into her main question, the one that challenges the whole premise of this Who's Cooler contest.
Okay, what is it?
She asks, and I love this, what if none of us, what if the cool ones are actually those unbothered people that nobody talks about?
Huh. That really reframes it.
Completely.
It makes you think, well, what is coolness then? Is it being super visible online, generating buzz all the time?
Or is it something else?
Or is there maybe a quieter, more enduring kind of cool that comes from shaping culture without making a big song and dance about it?
And that's where the article starts building its case for Gen X's quiet but, significant cultural contributions.
Right.
Even if they aren't always the loudest voice, their influence is, well, kind of undeniable.
So who does she point to?
She lists some figures who still have this certain coolness. Chloe Sevigny, Alexander McQueen, the vision there, Winona Ryder, Naomi Campbell, Kate Moss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big names, still influential.
Definitely.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, I mean, these people weren't just operating in isolation, were they?
No, not at all.
They were often key players in shaping actual movements. The article mentions stuff like Riot Girl
Yeah, the DIY feminist punk thing.
and zine culture, those
Yeah.
photocopied mags spreading alternative ideas.
Super important back then.
And then you've got distinctive filmmakers emerging like Sofia Coppola and David Lynch,
Oh, definitely. Lynch is a great example.
and the music, Britpop exploding, the massive impact of early MTV.
It's true. So much of what later generations picked up on has direct roots in what Gen X was doing, what they were creating.
Hmm.
And then the article shifts a bit, talking about their sense of style, arguing Gen X had a very distinct vibe.
Right. And what's interesting there is how fashion cycles back, isn't it?
Totally.
She points out how younger generations are now grabbing styles that were pure Gen X, the relaxed, slouchy jeans,
Yep.
layering long sleeves under T-shirts, spaghetti strap dresses coming back,
Oh, yeah, those are everywhere now.
and of course the once mocked ugly shoes.
Huh. Absolutely. Though the article does admit some things, like bootcut jeans, existed before.
Sure, origins can be complex.
But their association with Gen X in our collective memory is pretty strong.
Fair enough.
And then there's this great little aside about the Real Housewives of New York.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she admits she watches it, but she notes how those women, often having this sort of Gen X energy,
Yeah.
confidently rocked knee-high boots in the club and just had a generally less complicated approach to beauty routines.
Compared to today, you mean, right?
Exactly. Compared to today's elaborate, like, 12-step skincare routines.
Yeah. Right. That contrast kind of highlights up maybe the less performative, more self-assured style.
Yeah.
It feeds back into that idea of being comfortable, being unbothered, as she puts it.
And then she kind of brings it all back home, saying that dividing people strictly by generation is, well, a largely meaningless endeavor.
Which is a really important point, I think.
Definitely. She says individual experiences, shared passions, personal quirks, that stuff often matters way more than these broad labels.
Absolutely. These categories are useful for talking points, maybe, but they smooth over so much individual difference, so many connections across generations.
She even throws in this funny little thought about the Karen haircut
Right.
potentially being a Gen X invention, but she adds a very clear, don't quote me on that.
Huh. Okay, noted. It's a funny way to show how we try to pin these stereotypes onto generations, though.
For sure.
So ultimately, the article circles back to its main idea. While millennials and Gen Z are busy debating who's cool, maybe the answer is with the generation that isn't really playing that game. Maybe Gen X, in their more understated way, just is cool.
So the core takeaway here, this Vogue piece playfully suggests that while the spotlight's often on millennials and Gen Z,
Right.
the often overlooked Gen X might hold the key to a certain kind of authentic cool just by not trying so hard, but still leaving this really significant lasting mark on culture.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. Does true cultural impact, true coolness, come from chasing the spotlight and getting validated right now? Or does it come from something more organic, self-expression that resonates over time, maybe without needing all that constant self-promotion? And what other groups, maybe less discussed groups, have had a huge influence that we haven't fully appreciated because of all the louder generational noise?